Hey everybody, this is Blake here. I'm going to be reviewing Safe. I'm a pretty big Jason Statham fan, but I always feel that the movies he's in don't usually do him justice. Jason Statham is just one of those guys who has a cool personality, a lot of charisma. Even when he's sort of slumming it, I still think he's interesting. Like Death Race, for example, doesn't require too much acting, but I think Jason Statham is just so cool that he makes it work. The only movie I've seen of Jason Statham where I felt that he was really kind of dull and flat, where he really obviously did not want to be there, was In the Name of the King, which was directed by Uwe Boll. Honestly, in that movie, it felt like he just, after a hard night of partying, he woke up and found himself on the set of an Uwe Boll movie with a contract already signed. He really does look miserable in parts of that movie. But otherwise, as I said, my main problem with Jason Statham is that the movies he's in always seem so small scale and kind of mediocre. Now, I did like The Transporter. I like his other non-conventional action movies like The Bank Job, which is a thriller, Snatch, Killer Elite. I thought that was underrated, and it's kind of a shame that was such a bomb. But like The Mechanic, for example, the Transporter sequels, even the first Transporter, which, even though I liked it, I thought it was pretty good, I wouldn't say it was a great movie. I just wish there was more stuff like, when you saw Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, or even Van Damme and Seagal in their prime, where they had a lot more spectacle to work with, and I've always felt it was a shame that Jason Statham just never had that much. They had big-ass budgets. He has these tiny $30 million budgets. But I still feel the need to see all of his movies. Of course, his best movie by far, The Pink Panther. No, just kidding. That was one I made sure not to see while it was in theaters. I am ashamed to say I have seen it on DVD. But with Safe, it looked like your typical average Jason Statham movie. I didn't expect it to be any better than The Mechanic, which I guess I thought was pretty mediocre. But I ended up really liking it. It's not a perfect movie, but it is, I think, a really good action film. The first, and really the only major problem I had with this movie was how it starts. It has a real clumsy and awkward structure. It pretty much starts off with a girl, she's walking through the subway, and then she flashes back to being interrogated by these Russian dudes for a code. And then there's another flashback where you see how she got involved in all this business. And they cut to Jason Statham, and there's a flashback to when he was a cage fighter. And it went through this whole stuff where these Russians killed his wife. And it just seemed like they were over-convoluting the first act. Like it was trying to tell too much, and I felt they could have just simplified it by having it start off where the little girl gets involved in this, then Jason Statham, start with him where he's the cage fighter, and then they could have just moved up instead of just flashing back all that much. It doesn't even make sense. But once they get past the first act, it becomes a really cool movie. For one, all of the characters are interesting. Jason Statham's character really does have a tragic backstory, and it's hard not to feel bad for him. The little girl, typical little kid, but we'll get a little more into that later, hopefully. And but the villains are all equally interesting. I like how they're all different, too. Like, the Russians are portrayed as really sadistic and cruel, whereas the Asian gangsters are really cold and calculating, but definitely ruthless. And they're both intelligent, and they're both very bold in what they end up doing. And they were equally interesting in terms of which side I wanted to see more of. And then there's corrupt cops, and they're played by guys who I'm pretty sure only play corrupt cops. They always play, at least from when I see them, it's always like they're playing the same kind of roles. But they're all interesting. You could see that these guys are definitely competent and dangerous, but they're corrupt. And then in the shadows somewhere lurks a villain who might even be more badass than Jason Statham's character. And when he comes into play, he's really interesting too. And what I thought was cool about the plot anyway, is that it does occasionally break the rules in terms of narrative. There are some surprises that might disappoint some people. Like, there was one fight scene I was really looking forward to, but you don't really get it. But the way they do that was surprisingly clever, and it made everybody kind of cheer and laugh. And this was a great audience to watch the movie with because, I mean, they laughed at the funny parts, they cheered during the more awesome parts. I wish more crowds were like that with these types of movies, and it was surprisingly packed considering I saw it on Sunday, and it was kind of a bomb in its opening weekend. I think it only grossed $7 million or something like that. But it was a fun experience. But in terms of action, once they have that first train fight that you see in the previews where he defends her, that's awesome. Just all the moves and techniques used in the actual fight scene. It's part stylish, but part believable. And I think this is actually some of the best martial arts choreography I've seen in a Jason Statham movie. Even though this is not a martial arts film per se, it's not even as much as The Transporter was, but when he does do hand-to-hand combat, it is pretty spectacular. If I compared the action in this to The Transporter, I felt The Transporter was more, smooth, maybe a little bit more stylish, but this one's a lot grittier and in a way a lot more brutal and mean-spirited with its action. There's some real hardcore moves here, and the way it's framed is just awesome. You could see pretty much everything that matters, and usually with action movies, especially American action films, I'm presuming that this is an American production, I'm not completely sure, you just usually don't, it's usually shaky cam all over and stuff like that, but I had no problem with that. I thought the action was really well done. The film is brilliantly paced. It knows when to speed up, slow down. And when it slows down, it's surprisingly charming and funny. And I think that's one of the things I liked about this movie is that when it's an action film, it's badass and hardcore. But when it's slowing down and it's trying to build up character and the relationships and explain stuff, I thought it was always funny and interesting. So that's always a good thing. And what else can I talk about? There are just some really cool ways they shoot the action sequences that are both awesome but funny. Like at one point, Jason Statham gets into a car and we just see him, like the cameraman's in the back seat of the car, and we see him drive back and hit somebody, and they fly over the front of the windshield, and then he's I don't remember what he's actually doing, but then you see the guy get up and he just runs him over again, and you see him fly all the way back. It made, like I said, everybody was laughing and cheering, and it was awesome. And I was with them. I was laughing at the funny parts and cheering at the awesome parts, and sometimes both. Another weakness, though, is I think the little girl's acting was a little stiff at times. It's not as bad as what the trailers make it out to be, but I don't know. It wasn't that much of a problem, but she certainly was not one of the movie's bigger strengths. But I did like how they did try to put in some depth to the movie. Like one of the Asian dudes who's her adopted father, he's not just this one-dimensional monster. He actually seems to care for the girl, but they don't spend too much time on it to the point where it starts to become melodramatic. And same with Jason Statham's relationship with the little girl. It's pretty moving, but they don't spend too much time on it, just enough to where you care, but not to the point where it starts taking away from the action sequences. And it was a really nice balance. Really, I would say this was a great movie if it weren't for the awkward first act, like I said, where they kind of convolute everything. And but otherwise, I'd say it's a really good movie. It's certainly one of the better Jason Statham vehicles he's done. Really, the only hard or major spectacle Jason Statham movie I've seen is The Expendables. But I'm not sure if I'd say I liked The Expendables more than I liked this. But in some ways, I'd probably say this was the better movie. And it's not as good as The Bank Job, which I consider to be his best movie. And Killer Elite, maybe, but I felt Killer Elite kind of got bad during the last 20 minutes or so. It just kind of went over long. But this one is certainly one of his stronger films. If you like Jason Statham, you probably have already seen it, and I don't see why you wouldn't have. But if you like action movies in general, you should definitely give this a look. I'd say it's a real high matinee. I'd say it's probably a little bit better than The Raven, which I also thought was really underrated. But I'd say please give it a look if this interests you at all, because it saddens me that Jason Statham's movies aren't doing better, because I think he really does deserve to be a hardcore action star and needs to appear in bigger and better movies. And this one I thought was definitely a start, even though it has the budget was relatively small. Like I said, 30 million, I think, again. They did do a great job at making a hardcore action film. I did not do a written review. I don't know why, because it kind of seemed like something I would review, but I just couldn't think of anything clever to say. But definitely check it out. Like I said, High Matinee. Next week, of course, is the big one, the one you're all looking forward to. I'm, of course, talking about LOL, starring Miley Cyrus. Oh, that movie is going to be so epic. No, just kidding. The Avengers, I'm really looking forward to that one. The reviews are really good. Hopefully they're not overhyping the movie, but I'll definitely probably have a video up on that Saturday or Sunday next week. So I'll see you guys later.